Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Evolving Skies, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are looking over the best decks in the format and tweaking them to accommodate each other, really. Seeing what tech cards we can add into the game to make us have better matchups in some of our worst matchups, potentially, or just for the overall field. And today we're going to be looking at 6 decks. These are some of the 6 best performing decks. I think the only deck that is sort of like omitted from this list would be Rapid Strike. And that's really because we've seen it in so many renditions. We've seen it as Rapid Strike Moltres, straight Rapid Strike Inteleon, Rapid Strike Sylveon, which has been a variety of boxes, and even like Blaziken, Zeraora, like Cheryl stuff, even with some Vaporeon going on. So there's so much to dissect in terms of Rapid Strike that any list that I showed, people will be asking about this, that, and the other, and how we could tech it for whatever week that pops up. Just know that I do still respect Rapid Strike as one of the top decks in the game, and it does have a decent number of results behind it. But it really is down to personal preference in a lot of different ways to make the Rapid Strike work on any given tournament, basically, because that can be the sort of archetype that reacts to literally the previous tournament on the previous day, and you can change up your energy count and your Pokemon count and that sort of thing to accommodate what you think will be the most important and popular matchups, whereas these decks are more sort of nailed on, closer to certain 60s, and today I'm just going to look at my tech includes to try and make them have that little bit of an edge in the game. So let's start with Dragapult Inteleon. Dragapult Inteleon has been one of the best performers right now. It obviously hit the ground running in the format, and its main selling point really is that Max Phantom is very dangerous when you're combining it with the likes of Path and Marnie, and you're going to be disrupting alongside Zigzagoon to knock out opponents' Sobbles, and hopefully that means that they can't use Shady Dealings while you can. It means that you get set up, they don't get set up. That's kind of the idea that you go for with Dragapult. And to fall back on that, you can just always be disrupting. Even if they do evolve up their Drizzle or whatever, you can get it again the next turn before it becomes an Inteleon. You're then disrupting their damage output and future Shady Dealings. So you're always targeting these one prizes, and it helps your prize map a lot of the time. And you can set up counters in very specific ways to really help you out. It's a very cute deck that you can get very clever with maths alongside the quick shootings and the horror psychic energies as well for your sort of damage mods here. Really, the only changes I've made from what you'd call like standard lists is that I've made space for 2 Fan of Waves. Now you can either look at this like I've cut 4 Crushing Hammers and gone to 2 Fan instead and then gained 2 consistency spaces, or you could see the fans being, you know, potentially a 5th Psychic Energy, potentially a 4th Quick Ball, maybe like a 2nd Scoop Up Net, maybe a 4th Path, those sorts of cards, even a 3rd Quick Shooting potentially. Or 2nd Zigzagoon even, because it is that important to get it in the opening turns. But I really like Fan of Waves, and it's going to pop up in a number of the lists that we look at today, because I think it hits every deck in the format right now of the top decks. The only exclusion would be Zacian Zamazenta, which I think our matchup is fine against anyway, because we are going to be, you know, path heavy, so we can deal with the Zamazenta. We're Marnieing them constantly. We have good spread damage. So I think in general, we don't have to fear Zacian Zamazenta so much. But the Fan of Waves helps out, firstly, in mirror matches in a big way, because you're guaranteeing removal from half the energy cards, the Horror Psychics, and it means that you take less damage as well, which is nice. But the big one is your worst matchup, which is the Single Strike deck. You're terrified of Single Strike because Umbreon can slam you for weakness pretty aggressively. So having the Fan here to disrupt that is really nice. It low-key can help against Sylveon as well, because oftentimes they have like Moltres and they have Capture Energy, so sometimes you can catch a Moltres off guard here and there, but it's mostly to try and offset a turn attachment from a Single Strike player. Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, really it's down to the opening stages of the game, because we're hoping to capitalize and take knockouts on their Houndours before they evolve up. That's one less attachment they can get towards for their 3 energy attack cost. So if you've dealt with a Houndour and used a Fan of Waves, it can sometimes put them a turn behind attacking, and that's an extra turn for you to power up your backup Dragapult, get an attachment down, and an extra Max Phantom to spread damage counters onto their big threats, their V and V Max Pokemon, as well as maybe even targeting down more Houndours, because usually the opponent has to replace them at some point in the game anyway, because otherwise they will be running out of energy cards. So these fans really help out. It means the opponent has to have a really solid opening turn with like Capture Energy and Quick Balls and that sort of thing to get multiple Houndours out. And if they have slightly worse starts, the Fan of Waves can be really punishing for them. So I think in general it's just good in the game, but specifically to target your worst matchup, it makes a ton of sense for me here. The only other thing that I've done is added 4 70 hit point Sobbles. That's because Mirror Match is rife, and having the extra 10 hit points means you can at least get into your Drizzile a lot more often and not be completely crumbed by them Marnieing you and you just bricking straight away. Obviously, the highest win percentage goes to the person who goes first and gets their first attachment down, etc. But in general, having these extra hit points on the Sobbles will make you that little bit safer in the opening stages in that mirror match, which I think is really nice. And I think obviously most decks that I'll be looking at will have one of these 70 hit point Sobbles and still have a high count of Keep Calling because it's so good. But Dragapult really can't afford to use Keep Calling at all because you are just relying on getting turn attachments throughout the game on your Dragas themselves, and it's really only Raihan that can catch us up if we are hit with, you know, opposing fans or opposing hammers, that sort of thing. So having to panic what's it called? Quick Calling or whatever it is not very good with Dragapult. And also, we have really high odds to avoid that awkward situation and get our opening attachment on the right Pokemon because we have Fog Crystal and Quick Ball, as well as the 8 physical energy. So unlike the other Inteleon engine decks that only have the 4 Quick Ball and the 4 physical copies, we have the additional, 3 copies of Quick alongside the Fog Crystal to get our Dragapult into play on turn 1 to get attaching. And again, look at Jolteon, they have like Badge, so they can afford to attach to a Sobble. Suicune has Melanie. Leafeon has Greening Cells. Obviously, they're spending an attachment to on their Drizzile and the Sobble and getting Quick Calling that first turn, and they would only do it in a terrible situation where they didn't get Leafeon out. So I think that means that Dragapult is the best user of a 70 hit point Sobble. So I think that's worth the change right now for how important Mirror is. Outside of that, I think all accounts are very, very standard for what we've come to see from Dragapult. Speaking of standard, I have done basically nothing with Single Strike. I think it's one of these archetypes that just needs to set itself up, and I think that's its priority number 1, 2, and 3. I think you shouldn't take any slots away from this deck because you will just water it down and make it less consistent, which just means that it wins a lot less. So yeah, I like the 4 off copies of all the cards I'm playing. The only flip-flop I've done is gone to 1 Air Balloon, 2 Physical Switch. I believe that's a little bit handier in the game right now because there are so many Tool Jammers and Scrappers around that I don't want to be reliant on Air Balloon as one of my switching outs. So yeah, I prefer the double switch right now. But that's a really small min-maxing thing. Other than that, a very straightforward Single Strike because it's got enough selling points just by, hitting the weaknesses that it does, hitting the damage output that it does, having the early tempo gust plays available to it. There's so many selling points just inbuilt into the deck that just get it working enough, and that's going to give you the highest win rate over anything else. And let's face it doesn't have the Inteleon engine to fall back on. Its engine is Houndoom, which only accelerates energies, so you're just hoping that you just draw as best you can with Single Strike, so don't get techie with that list. Next up, let's talk about Suicune, and I'm going to preface this with accepting that I know Ludicolo has the most results and is by far the most popular way to play Suicune right now, but I want to sell you on Ice Rider Calyrex actually coming back into the format as possibly the better partner right now. So I will give credits to Ludicolo. It does mean that you can, hit VMAXs for 1-hit KOs quite often. But if you think logically about this, and if you look at the stats, actually, Suicune's some of its worst matchups are the Jolteon and the Dragapult. And obviously Jolteon is hitting you for weakness. But the main thing I think here is that both of these two archetypes are spreading and knocking out your 60 hit point Lotads, so you never get the cool rare candy combos of your Ludicolo in the first place. So it's kind of pointless, and it doesn't really do much. Now, there are some other VMAX archetypes. Obviously, there's Leafeon and there's Umbreon and even like Shadow Rider and Urshifu and those sorts of things. Urshi as well can obviously still target down the Lotad, and it's not great there. But there are some that just sort of hit the face, and those are the things where Ludicolo is best, and you do get the huge value of gaining 100 damage, and you can do a lot with it. But I think ultimately, just the decks that are in the format tends to make Ice Rider a better choice. It will give you a substantially better Jolteon matchup because you're not getting hit for the 200 into the active every turn, which you would be for Suicune, and they can just mop them up with quick shootings and whatnot. And it's one of your lowest win rate matches. Ice Rider doesn't suffer that quite as much, and actually can be threatening one-hit KOs and forcing Cheryls out of the Jolteon a lot more, even just one quick shooting. Like whilst you hit something else, can then force like Cheryl plays out of them because you're so close to getting a KO the following turn with Max Lance and additional quick shooting pings. So I think that Ice Rider is much better in that regard. I think he's good enough in the single strike matchup, which is currently favored for Suicune, by the way, because the amount of Houndoom pings that they put on themselves can then interact with your own quick shooting and put Max Lance into one hit KO range if they are forcing themselves into VMAXs, which they sometimes do in the later stages of the game because they can't keep up 2-for-2ing with the Suicune because we normally come out the gate swinging first with our Melanie plays and whatnot and extra quick shootings on our own end. So I think we're naturally favored into single strike, and Ice Rider's still decent there. I think we're slightly worse in the Zacian Zama matchup. You have to admit that because the Calyrex isn't as helpful as a Ludicolo would be. But in general, that matchup is pretty bad anyway. And we are playing Tool Scrapper to remove capes at the very least, and we are upping our intel count to 3 quick shootings, which they pretty much always ignore in that matchup. So maybe we get away with that. The only thing I will say is obviously quick shooting's not quite as good in the Zacian Zam matchup because they have Crystal Caves and we don't have any bounce for Stadium. But really, I just think we get less value from Ludicolo in the game right now. I don't think it does what it's intending to do against Dragapult and against Jolteon, and the Ice Rider ultimately is going to be a better choice and a more usable option, especially in those two matchups, which are huge matchups, which are some of Suicune's lowest win rates. You can see I've got Fan of Waves in here. Again, it's kind of testament to how good I think it is in the game. It's another tech card to help out against Draga, and it's good into just every matchup right now. It's just really good tutoring. I think it's just value when you have Shady Dealings on your side. A tempo removal at any point in the game can be really awkward for certain archetypes. So yeah, I think Ice Rider, I understand why Ludicolo came out the gate doing well earlier, and it's a lot cooler to play. But there isn't such easy VMAX matchups anymore. Like Sylveon's going way down in play, and Shadow Rider's gone off the face really. And those were some of the things that Ludicolo could feast on, and the Lotads are just too fragile into these other matchups. You end up having to cape your own Lotads. It's really sad. So I think Ice Rider is probably a better option at the moment. But obviously the Ludicolo is the bread and butter list right now that most people accept. Once again, we are adding Fan of Waves into our Jolteon list. This is really just the Fan of Waves show. Again, every list I've shown so far has special energies, more than 4 minimum special energies. So Fan is just a lot of good tempo removal. It really limits your opponent's actions. It forces a Suicune into using a Melanie the following turn, rather than having the option to boss or do this, that, the other, or Marnie you or that sort of thing. It forces Raihan from Dragapults, and as a spread deck, we can keep them off that option for a lot of turns. So this tempo removal is just really good, I think. And obviously, again, just like Dragapult trying to stop a Umbreon, we are trying to use Fan of Waves to stop an Urshifu smacking into us straight away. Hopefully then it means that we can use our Zigzagoon, target down Houndours, Fan of Waves them at the same time, maybe buy a turn out of them, even if they are just using Inner Focus or whatever for a turn. That's an extra turn for you to try and Thunder Rumble again and get more pressure down onto the board, that sort of thing. So I really like Fan. I think it's your best defense against Single Strike. And Jolteon at the moment hasn't been playing really any defense to Single Strike. I haven't seen many hammer builds of Jolteon. I've seen a lot more of Draga. But I think Fan makes a good amount of sense here. The spaces I've kind of eaten into is I've gone down to 2 Elemental Badge and I've gone down to 1 Cheryl. I think I kind of want 3 badge 2 Cheryl or 2 and 1. I don't think it really makes sense to add an extra slot for Cheryl without doing the badge at the same time, because they kind of go hand in hand. And again, there's so much tool disruption with Scrappers and with jammers right now. I don't want to lean too heavily into Elemental Badge, so I don't think those slots are super premium regardless. So I'm happy to see the Fan of Waves come in here to be just such a great tech card right now. And again, I'm min-maxing the 170 hit point Sobble. It means that, we still have the highest likelihood of, starting this one and getting the value of Keep Calling if we're in a pinch. Obviously, we're only getting, one less Sobble out, and you kind of get punished by, like, prizing and that sort of thing. But it means that against Dragapult, you can level ball out this Sobble, and you have much more confidence that you actually get into your first Shady Dealing, so you're not crumbed by their opening Marnie Gambit sort of thing. So I do really like that 70 hit point Sobble in the game. I think it makes a ton of sense right now. Next up, let's look at Zacian Zamazenta. I've been playing a ton of this because I've recently got back onto my old account, trying to prepare it for TCG Live, actually. So I'm grinding all my old tournament tickets on my other account, because this is obviously the demo that has everything. The other account has, like, nothing, because I haven't played on it since Team Up. So, yeah, I've been grinding a ton of Zacian Zam, and this is where I'm at with it right now. I've actually reduced the Rotom Phone package quite substantially. I think one Guru is always the sweet spot, because you never want to put the second one into play because it helps the prize map way too often for the opponent. And I like Rotom Phone situationally, but I don't think it's as important as having of extra switch outs in Birdkeeper and just increasing that energy count even more, because a lot of your win rate comes down to not whiffing your turn 1 energy drop and sometimes hitting energy off of Intrepid Sword. That's what makes this deck very dangerous as a player going first, because you can threaten that turn 2 attack and have really good tempo on your side. So I've been up to, I think, 15 energy at my highest point, and I'm down slightly to 13. But yeah, you could even completely remove the Rotom Phone package. I do still like Rotom Phone just as a, like, Marnie proofing mechanic, and it still has great synergy with Wisdom. Even, like, turn 1, you can do it without Guru in play and just have it for better Intrepid Sword odds. But right now, I just value never whiffing an energy drop for turn either. So I like the very slightly higher counts of energy. But I'll let you know that I've been all the way up to 15. So I really value energy drops every single turn. And when you don't have the traditional draw engine to fall back on, you don't want to whiff. So yeah, I really like the high energy count. And Scrapper is like a mandatory card right now, I think, in the game. Kind of goes without saying. But yeah, that's my Zacian Zam. I still think it's fine in the game. And I've been playing it a ton, and it hasn't, like, put me off the deck necessarily. It's not, like, the most interesting to play, but it's, like, fine in the game, and it keeps decks honest, really. So yeah. And then the last one I want to look at is Leafeon. I've recently profiled this, and it's not too different, honestly. I think the only change is that I've gone for 170 hit point Sobble to, again, do the min-maxing against Dragapult, because we have to respect it as, among the top 3 decks for sure. And I've also added in Raihan because I'm terrified that people actually will listen to me and start playing Fan of Waves or Crushing Hammers. One of the two things. So having the Raihan, same thing for, like, why Dragapult plays it, so that you can maintain your 2 energy attack cost that little bit better, and it can get you into some specific pieces, which can be nice in the mid to late game for grabbing things like Galamine out the deck and whatnot, or even grabbing you intel pieces. So yeah, I think that's a pretty standard Leafeon again. I'm not playing Fan in this list because you're not afraid of Single Strike so much, and that's one of the main reasons I like it in Dragapult and Jolteon. If you're just thinking, why isn't there a Fan in here? It's because that's actually one of the matchups that you feast on as Leafeon, the Single Strike matchup, because they naturally have high hit points on the Urshifu, and they can't really use the Umbreon too much, so that normally goes well for you. And I also think this is pretty decent into most Suicune builds, especially with the quick shootings, potentially on some Lombres and Lotads and that sort of thing. You can try and target those down and not make it possible for them to get over the line with that sort of thing. So yeah, pretty decent Leafeon. This is just kind of like a keep you honest kind of deck. It's decent into everything, but doesn't have, like, super high win rates into all of the matchups, and it actually struggles against Draga and Jolteon a little bit. So having that 70 hit point Sobble should help you out somewhat. Obviously, this deck wants to use Greening Cells, but I still like having the Panic Keep Calling option for those moments where you haven't found Capture or Leafeon or Quick Ball. It doesn't happen a lot, and if you are even more scared of Dragapult and you don't like that matchup, you could go all the way to 470 hit point Sobbles. I don't think it's that wrong. Because Greening Cells is your optimal end of turn play instead of attacking a lot of the time. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on my little top tier tweaks. Really, it's been the Fan of Waves show and the 70 hit point Sobble show. I think those are the keys to unlocking this format and increasing your win rate against some of, well, definitely against Single Strike and Dragapult. That's what those two techs are trying to target quite heavily. The Fan of Waves gets natural value in every matchup apart from Zacian Zamazenta. And the 70 hit point Sobble actually punishes you very few times. So let me know your thoughts, guys. Hope you did enjoy, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.